I'm Melanie, 30 years old, and my story isn't your typical married into money tale. As a former security specialist, I've protected billionaires and dignitaries, but nothing prepared me for protecting myself from my mother-in-law, Eleanor. When I married Nathan 2 years ago, I knew his old money family had expectations. What I didn't expect was Eleanor marching into my home with 6 country club friends, pointing at me like hired help and demanding I serve them tea. Thank God Marcus, my personal security, was there. Money doesn't buy class, but it sure bought me trouble. If you're dealing with toxic in-laws too, drop a comment about where you're watching from, hit like and subscribe, and let's commiserate about how family ties sometimes feel like handcuffs. Before I dive into the tea party from hell, you need to understand how a middle-class girl from Seattle ended up married to Nathan Whitfield, heir to the Whitfield banking fortune. I grew up in a modest neighborhood where my dad worked as a firefighter and my mom taught elementary school. Nothing fancy, but they instilled in me a rock-solid work ethic. I worked my way through college, double majoring in criminal justice and psychology while holding down 2 jobs. By 23, I'd landed a position with Elite Shield, a boutique security firm specializing in protection for high-net-worth individuals and corporate executives. Within 3 years, I'd built a reputation as one of the firm's top security specialists. I wasn't the intimidating muscle that was never my role. I excelled at threat assessment, security planning, and coordinating protection details. My specialty was being the unseen guardian, the one who anticipated problems before they happened. That's how I met Nathan. I was running point on security for the Westlake Children's Hospital charity gala magnet for Seattle's wealthiest families. Nathan was there representing his family's foundation. He wasn't what I expected from a banking heir. While other guests barely acknowledged security personnel, Nathan actually noticed when I quietly intercepted a drunk photographer who was getting too aggressive with the celebrities. That was impressive, he said, approaching me after the situation had been handled. Most people wouldn't have seen that coming. That's literally my job, I replied, not looking up from my communication device. Instead of being put off by my professional demeanor, he seemed intrigued. I'm Nathan, he offered. I know who you are, Mr. Whitfield. I studied the guest list. He laughed a genuine, warm sound. And you are? Melanie Reynolds, security coordinator. I finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. What I expected to be a brief exchange turned into a conversation by the service entrance, then coffee after my shift ended at 2 a.m., and eventually a whirlwind romance. Nathan fell for my independence, my straightforward nature, and what he called my refreshing lack of interest in his family name. Eleanor Whitfield, however, was a different story. From our first meeting at the Whitfield estate in Madison Park, she made it clear I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her only son. She scrutinized everything from my off-the-rack dress to my direct manner of speaking. Security, she'd repeated when Nathan explained my profession. How unusual. I thought perhaps you worked in public relations or event planning. The implication was clear. Those would have been acceptable careers for a Whitfield spouse. Personal security was not. Our wedding was the first major battleground. Eleanor insisted on a 500-guest extravaganza at the Seattle Yacht Club. I wanted something smaller and more personal. Nathan tried to play peacemaker, but ultimately stood by my choice as something Eleanor never quite forgave either of us for. It's just that the Whitfields have certain traditions. She'd sniffed when we announced our plans for a 100-person ceremony at a boutique hotel. But I suppose you wouldn't understand that, coming from your background. Nathan has always been supportive but conflict avoidant by nature. Growing up with Eleanor had taught him to pick his battles carefully. Mom's from a different generation, he'd often say. She means well. Sometimes I wondered if he truly believed that, or if it was just easier than confronting the dragon. After the wedding, I made one decision that particularly irked Eleanor, keeping Marcus as my personal security. Marcus had been my colleague at Elite Shield before transitioning to private security. The necessity arose after I helped build a case against Lawrence Mercer, a tech executive with dangerous connections who was eventually convicted of corporate espionage and fraud. The threats I received afterward were specific enough that maintaining security seemed prudent. Nathan understood completely. Eleanor did not. A bodyguard? Really, Melanie? This isn't some action movie. Yes, our home another point of contention. Nathan and I purchased a beautiful modern house in Bellevue, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. I decorated it myself, blending Nathan's preference for classic elements with my love of clean, contemporary design. Eleanor had offered repeated Lido have her people handle the interior design. My polite refusal was taken as a personal insult. In the 2 years since our wedding, Eleanor had made a habit of dropping by unannounced, usually with some urgent matter that required Nathan's attention or some social event we simply must attend. Each visit included pointed comments about something in our home that wasn't up to Whitfield standards. Which brings us to last Tuesday. The perfect storm for Eleanor's ambush. The doorbell chimed at exactly 1:30 p.m. Normally, I'd have checked the security camera before answering, but I was expecting a package containing reference materials for my project. Without looking up from my laptop, I called out to Marcus, who was reviewing security footage in the home office. Can you get that? It should be the courier. Instead of Marcus's acknowledgement, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening, followed by the high-pitched, theatrical voice that featured in most of my stress dreams. You who? Melanie, darling. Where are you hiding? Eleanor. Before I could even close my laptop, the clicking of multiple heels echoed across our marble foyer. I looked up to see not just Eleanor, but an entire entourage sweeping into my living room like they owned the place. 6 women, all in their 50s or 60s, dressed in what could only be described as country club casual expensive slacks, silk blouses, statement jewelry, and judgmental expressions. Eleanor stood at the center, resplendent in a pale blue St. John knit suit that probably cost more than my first car. Her silver blonde hair was coiffed to perfection, not a strand out of place despite the light spring breeze outside. She surveyed my work setup, papers spread across the coffee table, laptop open, coffee mug half empty with barely disguised disapproval. There you are. Ladies, this is Nathan's wife, Melanie, Eleanor announced, gesturing toward me as if I were an exotic exhibit at a zoo. Melanie, these are my friends from the Lakeside Country Club Committee. The women fanned out behind Eleanor like a defensive formation. I quickly cataloged them as Eleanor-made introductions. Barbara Wilson, a petite woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing and thin lips that seemed permanently pursed in disapproval. Barbara runs our annual charity auction, Eleanor explained. Translation: the biggest gossip on the committee. Patricia Montgomery, Eleanor's shadow and yes-woman, nodding along to everything Eleanor said. Her nervous smile and quick glances toward Eleanor screamed of someone who'd learned that agreement was the path of least resistance. Catherine Blackwell, tall and rail-thin with an expression of perpetual boredom. She said nothing, merely assessing me and my home with cool detachment. Virginia Roberts, whose pinched expression suggested Gloria Henderson, draped in so many gold accessories she practically jingled when she moved. Everything about her was dramatic, her gestures, her heavily made-up face, the way she gasped softly when she spotted my bare feet under the coffee table. And finally, Diana Miller, the only one who offered a genuine smile and a sympathetic glance. Lovely to meet you, she said quietly, breaking rank from the others. Before I could even respond to the introductions, Eleanor clapped her hands twice, actually clapped, like summoning a servant in a period drama. Melanie will be serving us tea and finger sandwiches in the sunroom, she announced, pointing at me like I was the help. We have our committee meeting to discuss the summer gala, and I thought, what better place than my son's lovely home? I blinked, momentarily speechless. Had she really just volunteered me to serve her and her friends without even asking? In my own home? While I was clearly working. Eleanor, I started, keeping my voice even. I'm actually in the middle of an important project with a deadline. I wasn't expecting company today. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. Oh, you can take a break from playing on your computer. Family obligations come first, dear. She turned to her friends. Melanie has this little consulting business. It's so sweet that Nathan lets her keep busy. Lets me? I felt heat rising to my face, but maintained my composure. Years of security work had taught me never to show when someone had gotten under my skin. Eleanor was already directing her friends toward our sunroom. The view from here is spectacular, ladies. Nathan insisted on this property despite the modern architecture. I would have preferred something more traditional, but you know how the young are these days. As the women began settling themselves around my sunroom, Eleanor turned back to me. We'll need the good tea service, the Wedgwood, not those modern mugs you usually use. And some proper sandwiches. Cucumber and cream cheese would be lovely, and perhaps some egg salad on that bread I brought over last week. Is it still fresh? You really should freeze it if you're not going to use it promptly. The women were already making themselves comfortable, placing designer handbags on my furniture, examining my decor with critical eyes. I love what you've done with the place, Barbara commented, running a finger along the edge of my coffee table. So, contemporary. Did you hire a decorator? No, I designed it myself, I replied, still standing in the middle of my own living room, feeling strangely like an intruder. Oh, how creative, she responded with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Virginia picked up a small sculpture Nathan and I had purchased on our honeymoon in Japan. Interesting choice. Eleanor, didn't you say Nathan's apartment used to be filled with proper antiques? Yes, before he moved here. Family heirlooms, some dating back generations. Now they're in storage somewhere. Eleanor sighed dramatically. But change is good, I suppose. I watched as these women examined my home, making underhanded comments disguised as compliments. My sanctuary was being invaded, my work interrupted, and I was somehow being cast as the villain in this scenario. Eleanor, I tried again. I really can't entertain right now. I have a deadline this evening and... Nonsense, Eleanor cut me off. Family comes first, Melanie. Nathan always says how important family is to him. Surely you don't want to disappoint him. Her voice had that dangerous sweetness, the kind that masked a threat. I glanced at my laptop, thinking of my client waiting for the security assessment, then at the 6 women now fully ensconced in my sunroom, and realized with growing anger that Eleanor had orchestrated this entire ambush. This wasn't just a spontaneous visit. This was a power play, designed to put me in my place serving her and her friends like the help she clearly thought I was. With my deadline looming and Eleanor's friends settling in like they were at a spa retreat, I reluctantly moved to the kitchen. As I filled the kettle, I pulled out my phone and texted Nathan. Your mother just showed up with 6 friends and told them I'd be serving them tea and sandwiches. I'm on deadline. Help. I stared at the screen, watching the message deliver, then show as read. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, then reappeared before his response finally came through. Sorry, babe. In meetings all day. Can you just go along with it this once? I'll make it up to you, promise. I stared. With a sigh, I put my phone down and began assembling a tea tray. I pulled out the Wedgwood set that Eleanor had given us as a wedding present, a set I'd used exactly twice, both times when she visited. As I arranged cups and saucers, I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor. The tea should steep for exactly 4 minutes, Melanie. Any longer and it becomes bitter. Eleanor had materialized in the kitchen doorway, watching me with critical eyes. And do we have any proper napkins? The linen ones, not those paper things you usually use. 3rd drawer on the left, I replied evenly, not looking up from the tea tray. The ones you gave us for Christmas. Good. You remembered. She moved closer, inspecting my work. The cucumber should be sliced paper thin, you know, and crusts removed from the sandwiches. I gripped the edge of the counter, summoning every ounce of professional composure I'd developed over years of dealing with difficult clients. "I know how to make tea sandwiches, Eleanor." "Of course you do, dear. I'm just trying to help." After all, entertaining is such an important skill for a Whitfield wife. She reached over and repositioned a teacup I'd just arranged. Nathan grew up with certain standards. There was again the implication that I wasn't good enough, didn't know enough, hadn't been raised with the right background to be worthy of her son. From the sunroom, I could hear the ladies' conversation, their voices carrying easily through our open-concept home. Eleanor mentioned she used to be in security, I heard Catherine say, her voice lowered, but not enough. Like a bodyguard or something. "Can you imagine?" Gloria responded with a tinkling laugh. "No wonder she's so direct. Not exactly the polished type we're used to seeing with the Whitfield men." "Nathan always did have unconventional tastes," Barbara added. "Remember that artist girl he dated in college? The one with all the piercings?" "Well, at least Melanie is presentable," Virginia said. "With some guidance, she might eventually understand how things are done in our circles." My cheeks burned as I sliced cucumbers with perhaps more force than necessary. I'd faced down corporate spies and actual threats to life and limb, yet these women with their passive-aggressive comments made me feel more undermined than any adversary I'd encountered professionally. Eleanor returned to her friends, and I could hear her joining the conversation. It's a process, training someone who wasn't raised with our traditions. I keep telling Nathan she just needs time to adapt to our ways. Training? Like I was some kind of pet to be housebroken? I finished preparing the tea tray and a plate of hastily assembled sandwiches. As I carried them into the sunroom, the conversation abruptly stopped the universal sign that I had been the topic of discussion. "Oh, lovely," Eleanor said with a tight smile. "Though I think we needed a few more sandwiches. There are 7 of us after all." "6, I corrected automatically. "I won't be joining you. As I mentioned, I have work." The women exchanged glances, clearly affronted by my direct refusal to participate in their impromptu tea party. "Work can wait, dear," Eleanor insisted. "This is an opportunity for you to get to know my closest friends. After all, social connections are so important. My client deadline can't wait." I turned to leave, hearing Patricia whisper not so subtly, "She's certainly independent." Back at my laptop, I tried to focus on my security assessment, but the chatter from the sunroom was incessant, punctuated by occasional laughter and Eleanor's voice rising above the others to make some point or another. Every few minutes, there would be a call for more hot water or another plate of sandwiches or questions about where the powder room was located. Each interruption chipped away at my concentration and my patience. The deadline clock was ticking, and I was making minimal progress. After the 3rd request for hot water, I received a text from my client asking for an update on the assessment. Just as I was about to respond, Eleanor's voice rang out again. "Melanie, we need more sandwiches, dear. And perhaps some of those little cookies you keep in the pantry." I closed my eyes, counted to 10. The sandwiches were adequate, though next time you might want to use a bit more cream cheese. She held out the plate expectantly. "We'll need at least another dozen. The ladies are famished after our tennis match this morning." "Eleanor," I said carefully. "Oh, it's just playing around on the computer," she dismissed. "Nathan makes more than enough to support both of you. These little projects of yours are a nice hobby, but surely not as important as making a good impression on the women who've been part of the Whitfield social circle for decades." "A hobby?" My security firm that I'd built from the ground up after leaving Elite Shield, that had major corporate clients and a waiting list? The work that had paid my way through life before I'd ever met Nathan? "It's not a hobby," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm that anyone who knew me would recognize as the eye of the storm. "It's my career. It's who I am." Eleanor sighed dramatically. "Melanie, dear, you're a Whitfield now. Your priority should be supporting Nathan and representing the family appropriately. Now, about those sandwiches." She snapped her fingers at me. Actually snapped her fingers like summoning a waiter in a bad movie. and something inside me broke. The sound of Eleanor's fingers snapping hung in the air between us like a slap. In my peripheral vision, I saw movement from the hallway leading to the home office. Marcus, alert to the rising tension, had emerged silently. At 6'3", with the build of a former college linebacker, Marcus Taylor cut an imposing figure even in his understated dark gray suit. His face revealed nothing, but I recognized his stand, relaxed but ready, the professional calm that comes from years of security work. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Whitfield?" he asked, his deep voice quiet but carrying effortlessly across the room. Eleanor startled, nearly dropping the empty plate she'd been holding out to me. She spun around, clutching her pearl necklace. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice rising an octave. "What are you doing in my son's house?" From the sunroom, I could hear the sudden hush as the ladies' chatter ceased, followed by the scraping of chairs as curiosity drew them toward the confrontation. "This is Marcus Taylor," I said, finding my voice and stepping forward. "My personal security." Eleanor's face went through a fascinating series of expression: shock, confusion, outrage, and finally, a forced smile as her friends appeared behind her. "Security," she repeated, as if I'd said something absurd. "In the house? During the day?" "Yes," I replied simply. Barbara peeked around Eleanor's shoulder, eyeing Marcus with a mixture of alarm and interest. "Why on earth do you need security in Bellevue? This isn't downtown." Before I could answer, Eleanor cut in. "Melanie used to work in some kind of security job before she met Nathan. I suppose old habits die hard." She turned back to Marcus, her society smile firmly in place, but ice in her eyes. "Well, Mr. Taylor, we're having a private family gathering. You can wait outside or in the staff quarters." Marcus didn't move. His expression remained professionally neutral as he replied, "I'm afraid we don't have staff quarters, Mrs. Whitfield. This is Mrs. Reynolds Whitfield's home, and I'm here at her request." Eleanor bristled at the hyphenated surname, another of our ongoing battles, as I'd chosen to keep my maiden name alongside Whitfield. "Well, I'm asking you to leave the room so we can continue our tea," Eleanor said, her voice hardening. "This is a private family matter." "Ma'am," Marcus responded with impeccable politeness, "I work for Mrs. Reynolds Whitfield, not for you. If she wants me to step out, I will." All eyes turned to me. In that moment, I felt a surge of gratitude for Marcus's steady presence and unwavering loyalty. He'd done exactly what a good security professional does: identified a potential threat. Yes, my mother-in-law had officially become a threat to my sanity and created space for me to take control of the situation. Eleanor's friends had formed a loose semicircle behind her, watching the drama unfold with varying reactions. Gloria looked scandalized, Virginia disapproving, Patricia anxious. Catherine observed with detached interest, like she was watching a mildly engaging play. Barbara seemed to be mentally taking notes for future gossip sessions. Only Diana hung back slightly, a flicker of what looked like empathy crossing her face. "I don't believe this," Eleanor said, looking around at her friends for support. "Treated like an intruder in my own son's home, with hired muscle intimidating me." "No one is intimidating you, Eleanor," I said calmly. "Marcus is doing his job, which is to ensure my well-being. Right now, that well-being includes being able to complete my work without constant interruptions." "Well," Eleanor huffed, drawing herself up to her full 5'5" height. "I have never been so insulted. We came here in friendship, to include you in our circle, and this is how you respond? By having this man stand guard over us like we're criminals." "You came here unannounced," I corrected her, "interrupted my workday, and have been treating me like household staff for the past hour." The country club ladies exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, others clearly entertained by the drama. I noticed Diana take a small step back from the group, subtly distancing herself from Eleanor's position. "I think," Marcus said quietly, "that now might be a good time for everyone to take a breath." "Don't you dare tell me what to do," Eleanor snapped at him. "I was handling social situations while you were still in diapers." I know exactly how to behave. With all due respect, ma'am, Marcus replied, unfazed by her outburst. Snapping your fingers at someone is generally not considered polite behavior in any social circle. A gasp went up from several of the ladies. Eleanor's face flushed crimson. How dare you? Do you know who I am? My family has been a pillar of Seattle society for generations. The Whitfield name opens doors that people like you couldn't imagine. I'm well aware of who you are, Mrs. Whitfield, Marcus said evenly. Your family's prominence doesn't change the fact that Mrs. Reynolds Whitfield deserves respect in her own home. The power dynamic in the room had shifted dramatically. Eleanor, used to commanding any space she entered through sheer force of personality and social standing, suddenly found herself on uncertain ground. Her friends, who moments ago had been a Greek chorus supporting her every word, now looked uncomfortable, as if unsure which way the wind was blowing. In the silence that followed, I realized something important. For the first time since meeting Eleanor Whitfield, I had the upper hand in our power struggle. And it felt good. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Eleanor's gaze darted between Marcus and me, her perfectly manicured hand still clutching her pearls. For once in her life, Eleanor Whitfield seemed at a loss for words. I decided it was time to break the stalemate. Ladies, I said, addressing the group, but keeping my eyes on Eleanor, I apologize, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I wasn't expecting guests today, and I have work commitments that can't be postponed. Patricia cleared her throat. Perhaps we should reschedule, Eleanor. We could meet at the club instead. Eleanor shot her a look that could have frozen lava. We are not leaving. Nathan would be appalled to know his mother was being treated this way in his own home. Would he? I asked quietly. Would Nathan really expect me to drop everything, including client deadlines, to serve tea without any advance notice? Family obligations come first, Eleanor insisted, but I noticed a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I agree, I said. Family is important. So is respect. And that's why we need to have an honest conversation, Eleanor. I gestured toward the living room. Ladies, would you excuse us for a moment? Eleanor and I need to speak privately. The women hesitated, looking to Eleanor for direction. Even in crisis, the social hierarchy remained intact. It's fine, Eleanor said stiffly. I'll join you in a moment. As the ladies retreated to the sunroom, I caught Diana's eye. She gave me a small, encouraging nod before following the others. Marcus took a step back. I'll be in the office if you need me, he said quietly. Once we were alone, Eleanor immediately went on the offensive. I don't appreciate being humiliated in front of my friends, Melanie. That was completely unnecessary. I agree, I said. The humiliation was unnecessary. So was showing up unannounced with 6 people and treating me like hired help in my own home. I was trying to include you, Eleanor protested, to help you build connections with the right people. You should be grateful. Grateful? For being ordered around? For having my work dismissed as a hobby? For having my home invaded without warning? You're being dramatic, Eleanor said with a dismissive wave. This is what families do. They drop in on each other. They help each other socialize appropriately. I took a deep breath. Eleanor, this isn't about dropping in. This is about a pattern of disrespect that's been going on since Nathan and I got married. You criticize my background, my career, my home, everything about me. You make decisions about my time without consulting me. You treat me like I'm somehow beneath you. That's ridiculous, she scoffed, but her eyes slid away from mine. You're just overly sensitive. You don't understand how things work in our world. Your world, I corrected. And I understand perfectly. I've worked with wealthy families for years, Eleanor. I've seen healthy dynamics and toxic ones. What you're doing isn't about family traditions or social norms. It's about control. Eleanor's face hardened. You think you know everything, don't you? Just because you married my son doesn't mean you understand what it means to be a Whitfield. Nathan was raised with certain expectations, certain standards. Nathan is a grown man who chose to marry me, exactly as I am, I interrupted. He doesn't expect me to be a carbon copy of the women in your social circle. Well, he should. Eleanor snapped, her composure finally cracking. Do you think it's easy for him, having a wife who doesn't fit in? Who keeps a bodyguard around like some kind of celebrity? Who prioritizes her little security business over proper society responsibilities? From the sunroom, I could hear the low murmur of conversation, the ladies undoubtedly straining to hear our exchange. I lowered my voice. Nathan loves me for who I am, not for who you want me to be. And he respects my career, even if you don't. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. I'm calling Nathan right now. He needs to hear about this. This disrespect. She pulled out her phone from her designer handbag. Good idea, I said, surprising her. Let's call him together. On speaker. I took out my own phone and dialed Nathan before Eleanor could. After 2 rings, he picked up. Hey, babe, I'm still in meetings. Can I call you back? Nathan, your mother is here, I said, keeping my voice steady. With 6 friends from the country club. She'd like to speak with you. Mom's there, he asked, confusion evident in his voice. I didn't know she was visiting today. Neither did I replied. She arrived unannounced about an hour ago and informed me I would be serving them tea and sandwiches. Eleanor reached for the phone. Nathan, darling, your wife is being completely unreasonable. She has her bodyguard intimidating us and... Whoa, wait, Nathan interrupted. Mom, did you really show up without calling first? You know Melanie works from home on Tuesdays. This is important, Nathan. The summer gala committee needed a meeting place, and I thought it would be nice to include Melanie in our planning. By having her serve refreshments? Nathan asked, his tone sharpening. Mom, that's not including her. That's treating her like staff. Eleanor's face flushed. Don't be ridiculous. I was simply showing her how these things are done. She needs to learn if she's going to represent the family properly. There was a pause on the line. When Nathan spoke again, his voice had changed firmer, more decisive than I'd ever heard him sound with his mother. Mom, Melanie doesn't need to learn how to represent the family. She is family. And she deserves the same respect you'd give any family member. Nathan, Eleanor gasped. I can't believe you're taking her side against your own mother. I'm not taking sides, Mom. I'm asking you to treat my wife with respect. That includes calling before you visit and not volunteering her time without asking. Eleanor looked genuinely shocked. In all the years I'd known her, I'd never seen Nathan stand up to her so directly. I think, Nathan continued, it would be best if you and your friends continued your meeting at the club today. Melanie has work to finish, and I'd appreciate it if you respected that. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor stared at the phone like it had betrayed her. I see, she said finally, her voice brittle. Well, if that's how you feel, we'll leave. I wouldn't want to impose where I'm not wanted. Mom, Nathan sighed. That's not what I said. You're always welcome in our home. Just call first, okay? Like any family member would. Fine, Eleanor said tightly. We'll discuss this later, Nathan. In private. Sure, Mom. I'll call you tonight. He paused. Love you. Eleanor didn't respond, just gestured for me to end the call. When I hung up, she turned toward the sunroom, composing herself visibly. Ladies, she called out, her voice artificially bright. We'll be continuing our meeting at the club. There's been a change of plans. The women filed out from the sunroom, collecting their purses and wraps. Most avoided eye contact with me, except for Diana, who hung back as the others headed for the door. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm sorry about all this. Eleanor can be traditional in her expectations. Thank you, I replied, surprised by her kindness. As Eleanor shepherded her friends toward the front door, her back ramrod straight, I could already hear her spinning the story. Melanie is so busy with her work project, we simply must let her focus. Nathan would want us to be understanding. The door closed behind them with a definitive click, and for the first time in over an hour, my home was quiet again. I stood in the empty foyer, a strange mixture of triumph and anxiety washing over me. I'd won this battle, but the war with Eleanor was far from over. And I wasn't sure what the fallout would be. The house felt strangely empty after Eleanor and her entourage departed. I returned to my laptop, but the confrontation had left me too wired to focus immediately. My hands were actually shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash following an intense situation. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression professionally neutral. "Everything all right?" I nodded. "They're gone. Thanks for having my back." "Just doing my job," he replied, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Marcus had been dealing with Eleanor's disdain since I'd married Nathan. The sidelong glances, the comments about staff knowing their place, the way she'd ask him to park the car or carry packages as if he were a chauffeur rather than personal security. "Want a debrief?" he asked, falling into our professional pattern. I smiled at the familiar routine. In security work, debriefing after incidents is standard procedural way to analyze what happened, identify what went well or poorly, and prepare for future situations. "Actually, yes," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Professional assessment?" Marcus sat down, shifting into analysis mode. Subject entered premises without authorization, accompanied by multiple unknown individuals. Subject attempted to assert authority beyond her standing and made demands that interfered with your scheduled tasks. When boundaries were established, subject escalated verbally but withdrew when backup support arrived. I couldn't help laughing at his clinical description of my mother-in-law. That's one way to put it. "Threat assessment," he continued, the hint of a smile breaking through his professional demeanor. "Low physical threat, high emotional manipulation risk," I replied, falling into our familiar pattern. "Likelihood of repeat incident, very high." "Recommended security measures?" I considered this. "Maintain current protocols. Add screening of unscheduled visitors before entry. Develop clear response plan for future incidents." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Good assessment." I'd add, "Consider briefing primary stakeholder more thoroughly on potential threats and response protocols." "Primary stakeholder?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my husband?" "Affirmative." Marcus stood up. "Speaking of which, your phone is lighting up. Looks like he's calling back." Sure enough, Nathan's name was flashing on my screen. I picked up as Marcus discreetly left the room. "Hey," I answered. "Are you okay?" Nathan asked immediately. "I'm so sorry about Mom. I had no idea she was planning to ambush you like that." "I'm fine," I assured him. "Just processing. Your mother has pulled stunts before, but this was next level." "I know." He sighed heavily. "I just stepped out of my meeting to call you properly. I can't believe she showed up with the entire committee. That's outrageous, even for her. The kicker was her snapping her finger." "She didn't," Nathan groaned. "God, Mel, I'm really sorry. Look, I'm going to wrap things up here and come home early. We need to talk about this face to face." An hour later, I heard Nathan's car pull into the driveway. I'd managed to make significant progress on my security assessment once my adrenaline levels had returned to normal, but I was still keenly aware of the emotional toll the confrontation had taken. Nathan came through the door looking harried, his tie loosened and hair slightly mussed from running his hands through Ithis-tel when he was stressed. He immediately crossed the room and pulled me into a tight hug. "I should have been here," he murmured against my hair. "It's okay," I said, relaxing into his embrace. "I handled it." "I know you did." He pulled back to look at me. "You always do. But you shouldn't have to handle my mother alone." We moved to the couch, where Nathan listened as I recounted the full experience, from Eleanor's dramatic entrance to Marcus's intervention to the phone call. I've never heard you speak to her like that, I said when I finished. About respecting me, I mean. Nathan ran a hand through his hair again. I should have done it a long time ago. It's just, you know how she is. How she's always been. Growing up with Eleanor as a mother, you learn to pick your battles carefully. I get that, I said. But Nathan, this can't continue. The constant criticism, the unannounced visits, the way she treats me like I'm somehow beneath her, it's wearing me down. He nodded slowly. You're right. It's not fair to you, and honestly, it's not helping my relationship with her either. I've been avoiding conflict for so long that she thinks she can get away with anything. What do we do? I asked. I don't want to put you in the middle, but I also can't keep living like this, constantly bracing for her next ambush. Nathan took my hand, his expression more resolved than I'd ever seen it when discussing his mother. We set boundaries, Lear, firm boundaries. Together. And we enforce them consistently. She won't like that, I warned. No, he agreed with a grim smile, she won't. But that's not our problem. Mom needs to understand that when she disrespects you, she's disrespecting both of us. Our marriage. Our choices. We spent the next hour developing a concrete plan for handling Eleanor moving forward. No more unannounced visits she would need to call at least a day in advance. No more criticism of my career or background. No more volunteering our home or our time without checking with both of us first. I'll call her tonight, Nathan said when we'd finished. Better to address this right away, while today's incident is still fresh. I squeezed his hand. Thank you for understanding. For standing up for us. I should have done it sooner, he admitted. It's just, she's been the dominant force in my life for so long. After my dad died, she took control of everything, the family, the social obligations, my life. I got used to going along with her demands because it was easier than fighting. I understand, I said. But we're a team now. You don't have to face her alone anymore. That evening, Nathan called Eleanor while I sat beside him, our hands linked. He put the phone on speaker as it rang. Nathan, Eleanor answered coolly. I was wondering when you'd call. Hi, Mom. I wanted to talk about what happened today. Yes, well, I've been thinking about that too. I may have been a bit presumptuous in bringing the committee to your home without notice. Nathan and I exchanged surprised glances. This almost sounded like the beginning of an apology, something I'd never heard from Eleanor. It was more than presumptuous, Mom. It was disrespectful to Melanie and to our home. I was trying to help, Eleanor insisted, her tone hardening. Melanie needs guidance on how to navigate our social circles. You know how important these connections are for your career, for our family standing. Mom, Nathan said firmly, Melanie doesn't need guidance. She's accomplished and capable on her own terms. What she needs, what we both need, is for you to respect our boundaries. Eleanor made a dismissive sound. Boundaries. Everyone's obsessed with boundaries these days. In my day, family didn't have boundaries. We were involved in each other's lives. Being involved is fine, Nathan replied. Controlling is not. From now on, we need you to call before visiting. No more surprise drop-ins. You're saying I need permission to visit my own son? Eleanor's voice rose incredulously. I'm saying you need to show the basic courtesy you'd extend to any adult, Nathan countered. Would you show up unannounced at a friend's house with 6 people in tow and expect to be served? The silence on the other end suggested Eleanor was not accustomed to this level of directness from her son. Furthermore, Nathan continued, I need you to stop criticizing Melanie's background, her career, or her choices. She's my wife, Mom. When you disrespect her, you disrespect me too. I see, Eleanor said icily. She's turned you against me. After everything I've done for you, all the sacrifices I've made. This isn't about turning anyone against anyone, Nathan interrupted. This is about mutual respect. We respect you, Mom. We want you in our lives. But it has to be on terms that work for all of us. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Eleanor cycling through various tactics: guilt, anger, emotional manipulation, even a few tears. But Nathan remained steadfast, gently but firmly reiterating our boundaries. By the time we hung up, I wasn't sure if we'd made progress or just drawn battle lines more clearly. Eleanor had eventually agreed to call before visiting, but her frigid tone suggested this was far from over. That went about as well as could be expected, Nathan said, exhaling heavily. She'll test these boundaries, I predicted. Probably sooner rather than later. I know, he nodded. But we'll be ready. Together. As I leaned against him, I felt a new appreciation for the man I'd married. Nathan might have spent years avoiding conflict with his mother, but when it mattered, when our relationship was at stake, he'd found the strength to stand firm. The battle with Eleanor was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like we were truly united on the same side. 1 month passed after the Tea Party confrontation, a month of significant change in our family dynamics. As I'd predicted, Eleanor tested our boundaries, almost immediately showing up unannounced 3 days after our phone call, ostensibly to drop off some mail that could easily have been forwarded. Nathan had calmly but firmly reminded her of our agreement, asking her to call next time. She'd left in a huff, but it was a critical moment, the first time our united front had held firm in person. The next test came a week later when Eleanor called Nathan directly, bypassing me entirely, to invite us to a charity gala. It's so last minute, I didn't think Melanie would be able to rearrange her work schedule, she'd explained sweetly. I know how busy she is with her consulting. Nathan had simply replied, I'll discuss it with Melanie and we'll let you know, refusing to make decisions without me as he might have done in the past. The most challenging moment came when Eleanor attempted to rally the extended Whitfield family against me. She'd called Nathan's cousins, his aunt and uncle, even his godfather, spinning a tale of how I was isolating Nathan from his family, how I had armed security, preventing her from visiting her own son. She's painting you as some kind of controlling villain, Nathan had warned me after his cousin James called to check in on him. Rather than letting this divide us, we'd decided to host a small family dinner, inviting key members of the Whitfield clan to our home. It was my idea, chance to show them directly who I really was, rather than the caricature Eleanor had created. The evening had been a success. Nathan's Aunt Elizabeth, his father's sister, had particularly warmed to me. You remind me of myself at your age, she'd confided after dinner. I married into the Whitfield name too, you know. Eleanor never quite forgave me for stealing her brother-in-law from her carefully selected candidates. This revelation that Eleanor had a history of trying to control family marriages had been illuminating. We'd gained valuable allies that night, people who could see through Eleanor's manipulations because they'd experienced them themselves. The ultimate test came at the monthly family dinner at Eleanor's home, a tradition we'd kept despite the tensions. Eleanor had been civil but cool throughout the appetizer and main course. But as dessert was served, she'd made a pointed comment about daughters-in-law who make an effort to fit into family traditions while describing her friend Virginia's new daughter-in-law. In the past, I would have let it slide or Nathan would have changed the subject. But this time, I'd met her gaze directly and said, I think the best family traditions are the ones that make room for new members and new perspectives, don't you? Eleanor had been momentarily speechless, not because my response was particularly cutting, but because I'd calmly addressed her passive-aggressive comment head-on, without either ignoring it or escalating. After a tense moment, she'd surprisingly nodded and said, Perhaps you're right, Melanie. Some adaptation is necessary as families grow. It wasn't exactly an olive branch, but it was the closest thing to acknowledgement of my place in the family that I'd ever received from Eleanor. As for my bodyguard Marcus, Eleanor had gradually stopped making pointed comments about his presence. The turning point had been when her car broke down after a fundraiser and Marcus had efficiently arranged for assistance while Nathan and I were still inside the venue. Eleanor's grudging "thank you" had been brief but genuine. Today, a full month after the confrontation, I was meeting Diana, the one sympathetic member of Eleanor's tea committee, for coffee at a small cafe near the lake. To my surprise, she'd reached out a week after the incident, apologizing again for her part in the ambush and suggesting we meet. "I want you to know I've always been uncomfortable with how Eleanor talks about you," Diana confided over her latte. "My daughter married a man from a completely different background as a firefighter, no connections to our social circles. Eleanor was horrified when I supported their marriage." "Why do you stay friends with her?" I asked, genuinely curious. Diana sighed. 30 years of history, for one thing. And Eleanor wasn't always like this. After her husband died, she became more controlling, more rigid about social rules. I think it was her way of creating order in a world that had suddenly become unpredictable. This insight into Eleanor's behavior didn't excuse it, but it helped me understand it better. Loss and grief can change people, sometimes hardening them against further pain by building walls of control. "She respects strength, Diana added, surprising me. She'd never admit it, but the fact that you stood up to her actually raised her estimation of you. Eleanor despises weakness more than anything." I thought about this as I drove home later. Perhaps the key to dealing with Eleanor wasn't trying to please her an impossible task, but rather consistently showing her that I couldn't be intimidated or controlled. When I arrived home, I found Nathan in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner, a new hobby he'd taken up recently. "How was coffee with Diana?" he asked, looking up from a recipe displayed on his tablet. "Enlightening," I replied, kissing him hello. "I think I might have gained in Alan some insight into your mother." As we prepared dinner together, I shared what Diana had told me about Eleanor's transformation after her husband's death. "That tracks," Nathan said thoughtfully, chopping vegetables with newfound confidence. "Dad was always the buffer between Mom and the world. He could calm her down when she got on one of her tears about propriety or tradition. After he died, it was like she clung to those rules even harder." "It doesn't excuse how she treats people," I noted. "No," he agreed, "but it helps explain it. And knowing where someone's coming from makes it easier to deal with them effectively." That was security specialist thinking, understanding motivations to better predict and manage behavior. It seemed Nathan had been picking up some of my professional perspective, just as I'd been learning about his world. Later that evening, as we relaxed on the couch, Nathan's phone rang. He checked the screen and raised an eyebrow. "It's Mom," he answered, putting it on speaker. "Hi, Mom. You're on speaker with Melanie and me." "Hello, both of you," Eleanor said, her tone unusually measured. "I'm calling because the annual Whitfield Foundation Gala planning needs to begin, and I wanted to ask, not tell, but ask if Melanie might be interested in joining the committee this year." Nathan and I exchanged surprised glances. The committee would benefit from some fresh perspectives, Eleanor continued when we didn't immediately respond. "And I understand Melanie has experience with security logistics, which could be valuable." It was the closest thing to a peace offering I could imagine from Eleanor Whitfield, acknowledging my professional expertise as something of value rather than a quirky hobby to be tolerated. "I'd be happy to help, Eleanor," I said after a moment. "Thank you for thinking of me." "Excellent. I'll have my assistant send over the details. We meet on Thursdays at 2. I hope that works with your schedule." "If not, I'm sure we can find a solution," I replied, keeping my tone friendly but firm, establishing that I wouldn't simply rearrange my life at her convenience. "Yes, well, good evening then," Eleanor said, somewhat awkwardly, before hanging up. Nathan stared at the phone. "Did my mother just compromise?" "I think she did," I laughed. "The world must be ending. Or beginning," he suggested, pulling me closer. "A new chapter, anyway." That night, as Nathan slept beside me, I reflected on the journey of the past month. The confrontation with Eleanor had been uncomfortable, even painful, but necessary, like lancing an infection to allow healing to begin. My relationship More importantly, Nathan and I had grown stronger as a couple. By facing Eleanor together, we discovered a new level of partnership, a deeper trust in each other. Nathan had found the courage to set boundaries with his mother. I'd found the patience to understand her rather than simply resist her. In my security work, I'd learned that sometimes the most dangerous moment in a confrontation is not the initial clash, but the aftermath when people are licking their wounds, calculating their losses, and planning their next moves. How you handle that period often determines whether conflict escalates or resolves. Eleanor had tested our boundaries, but ultimately recognized that her traditional tactics wouldn't work anymore. We had established a new normal one where I was treated as an equal partner in the Whitfield family, not as an interloper to be trained or controlled. As I drifted toward sleep, I smiled at the irony. Eleanor had spent her life cultivating power through social connections and family control. But true power, I'd learned, came from knowing your own worth and refusing to let others diminish it, a lesson that my confrontation with Eleanor had reinforced in the most unexpected way. The battle with my mother-in-law had taught me that sometimes having your own bodyguard moment, whether literal or metaphorical, is necessary to maintain your dignity and self-respect. And that's a lesson worth sharing. Have you ever had to stand up to a difficult family member who crossed your boundaries? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful, subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about navigating complicated relationships, and share with anyone who might be dealing with their own Eleanor. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for healthy relationships. Thank you for watching, and remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion of you.